What's happening? Thanks for joining me as always. It is much appreciated. It is a Friday, best day of the week. Y'all are making it through another week at work, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. Let's get into some Patriots talk. Earlier in the week, we discussed Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith, their track record, as well as the fact that they're going to be changing the grading system, evaluating players from the Belichick grading system to the Green Bay Packers grading system. But their impact, both guys, their impact goes far beyond that grading system within this Patriots front office and what we can expect. Plenty of changes. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, he is somebody who has looked at the draft year in and year out. He's very good. He talks to pretty much every team across the board. He has his connections within the game of football. And he was on the Eye on Foxborough podcast from Mass Live this week. And I thought Zierlein had a number of things that he said that were very revealing, not only about Wolf and Highsmith and how they're going to handle their business here in New England, but also Bill Belichick and how he handled his business here in Foxborough over the past quarter of a century. Here's what Zierlein said. Quote, I think Elliott Wolf is going to be a breath of fresh air for Patriots fans because Belichick, for as great as he was, I think at some point, I just think the circle was too tight. And I don't think Belichick took enough input from other places. The autocracy became an issue because I don't think there was a collision of ideas. When you don't have that, when you don't have a healthy dosage of combat in there to fight for players and go watch tape together, you really miss out. You get stuck in a one-man show. I call this show a one-man band. And Zierlein saying that Bill Belichick was a one-man band in that front office. Now, again, this is not somebody who is local. This is not somebody who has some kind of grudge against Belichick. This is somebody who talks to all the teams across the league, has a good idea about how each team runs their draft and the communication process between the 32 teams. And Zierlein is telling us this was a one-man band in New England. Belichick was the guy, and the circle got tighter and tighter and tighter. And one thing that a lot of us overlook when we talk about this Patriots dynasty, and by the way, I watched the first 2 episodes last night on Apple TV. Absolutely fantastic. Can't wait to watch the rest of that documentary. But I think many of us, even myself at times, we overlook the idea of how many people in that front office left the front office over the years. Scott Pioli, Thomas Dimitroff, Dave Ziegler, all these names, right? Guys that were in that front office doing the work, talking to the teams, and working on the draft and free agency. And the more you lose people, John Robinson is another person. The more you lose from that front office, the guys that you lose are also taking other people. Monty Ossenfort is another one. And they're taking people with them as they leave the Patriots organization. And as you have more turnover, that circle does get tighter. And I think the more people that are leaving the building, the less trust you have with the people that are left over in the building. And I absolutely believe when you look at how the Patriots handled their drafting from 2015 to 2022, and it's not like they swung and missed on every single pick. That would be ridiculous. It would be disingenuous for me to say. But when you look how they ran the operation, it does seem like, and Zierlein is telling us, that Belichick was running the ship, and there were less people in that room year by year by year, which means there was less of the circle of trust. And that is an issue. When you're looking at a draft, when you're trying to figure out what your team wants to do, you have to have trust. You have to have conversation. You have to have a lot of different ideas. And with the circle of trust being so tight around Belichick, there was less pushback towards Belichick. Not to mention his number 2 guy, Matt Groh. Groh, he could look at Belichick as the reason why he was where he was in the NFL. So less pushback, less thought process. And when you limit the thoughts and you limit that think tank and the pushback, you are limiting your potential as a football team because you don't know what somebody else feels about a certain player. And if that person doesn't want to speak up for that player, you will never know how they feel about said player. So everything kind of gets wrapped up into one summation from Bill Belichick, and that's the guy you take. And that's why you have the N'Keal Harry, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown conversation where the scouts are looking at A.J. Brown and they're looking at Debo. They like those guys. But Belichick, again, tight circle within his own mind. He's looking at Harry from Arizona State, Herm Edwards, people that he trusts out there with that program, and he falls in love with Harry and he picks Harry because there wasn't a fight. There wasn't a debate. There wasn't much of a conversation about why we should take this guy. And if there was a conversation, it likely didn't last long, and it really didn't matter because Belichick was going to make the decision off of how he felt. All right, we'll talk more about the changing dynamics of the front office coming up, what Wolf and Highsmith will bring to this front office beyond just the grading process and evaluation of players. But I want you to take a second, give us that thumbs up, like this program. Always say it, more likes means more eyeballs. And let's get those subscriptions pumping again. We're less than 100 away from 2,000 subscribers. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, like and subscribe to this program, rate and review as well. A word that we're going to hear an awful lot over the next few months is collaboration. Shoot, we've already heard the word a lot. Collaborative, collaboration, right? We hear that an awful lot from Gerard Mayo, from his coaching staff, from Robert Kraft. Everybody is selling you on collaboration. And what that means is being open-minded, getting others' opinions. You know, when I was program director out in Sacramento for about a year or so, I would talk to the staff. I would get their thoughts. I would talk to the producers. I would talk to the hosts. I would talk to my assistant program director. I would talk to the people above me. I would get their thoughts and their ideas. Now, I ultimately had the final call for about 7 months of that year. That's a different story. But I had the final call. I had the autonomy for about the first 7 or 8 months. And I would make the ultimate decision. But I would have conversations with people in the building because I wanted to know how they thought and how they felt about certain things. And when you really have something working at a high level, when you are making decisions at a high level, I personally believe my own philosophy is have as many voices in there as possible, as many educated voices as you can have. You take the information from everybody in that room, and then ultimately you come to the best decision that you have made. That, to me, is the best way a process works. And that's where the Patriots, I think, are going, right? Collaboration. Everybody in the room has a voice. Doesn't mean they're making the call. But if somebody likes Drake May a lot, say it's draft night, right? And realistically, well before the draft, say it's within the next couple of weeks, right? You're coming out of the combine. You might have Cam Williams on the scouting staff say, I love Drake May. Think he's great. You could have Matt Gross say, I'm not a big fan of May. Alonzo Highsmith might say, I like May, but I'm not totally sold. Now that conversation starts and everybody's throwing out their opinions. And the more that you go through this, and the more of the process that you take into consideration, the more film you watch, the more debate you have, you will land closer to the accurate evaluation of that player than you would if you just had one guy in the room looking and saying, I like him, we're going to take him. Because you need to know why people might not like this prospect, might not like this free agent. If you had more pushback, maybe somebody in that room would have said, hey, Bill, look, Juju Smith-Schuster might be toast, bro. And I don't know if they'd call Belichick bro, but you get the point. His knee doesn't look great. We've heard that the knee's not good. Somebody might have piped up and said his route running isn't as good as some think. So, that conversation matters. When you have more eyeballs on the player, you get a better evaluation of that player because you have some people looking at the weaknesses. You have other people accentuating the strengths. And between that conversation, that tit for tat, that back and forth, you will get more evaluation about the player. And when you think about that, when you extrapolate it, it also means that you'll have a better idea of the board. Every team has a draft board. And if you have a good back and forth collaboration, if you have that, when you set your board as a team, you now feel more confident in that board, and you likely have more players on the board. You're not limiting yourself because it's not one person's thoughts. Everybody's throwing ideas out there. Here's more from Zerline. Again, this was from the Ion Foxborough podcast at Mass Live. Lance Zierlein, NFL.com draft analyst. He says, quote, I think Elliott Wolf's going to have a feel for what the rest of the league may do, which is something I think has been missing. This is a huge factor in how this front office is going to run and how the front office has been run over the past 20 plus years with Belichick. Think about it. The circle is much less in size as it was going back 20 years ago. Less influential people within that circle. And so with less people, you're having less conversations. You're having less conversations with each other, but you're also having less conversations with the rest of the league. And that is critical to this operation. And that's why when we talked about Elliott Wolf versus Matt Groh, before the decision was made to give the reins to Elliott Wolf this offseason to make the final call, this is why we discussed Wolf versus Groh. And I talked a lot about the vast network of Elliott Wolf. Because you need to know people around the league. You need to pick up the phone and you need to call people around the NFL and say, what do you think about this guy? What do you think about that guy? Hey, would you mind moving this pick for that pick? And it's not to say the Patriots didn't make phone calls with Belichick. Of course they did. They traded a ton in the draft and outside of the draft. But how big was that network? We hear about the story with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? That Belichick didn't really talk to many other teams outside of San Francisco because of his relationship with Kyle Shanahan, because he was friends with his father, Mike Shanahan. So the bigger the network, the better. In the fact that they are going to communicate better across the league. You know, it wasn't always the case, as Zierlein says, that people had a feel for what the rest of the league was going to do. So when you have that vast network, and you are really good at communicating, then you know what other people are thinking about the draft and what they might do. You have an understanding of the bigger picture. You're looking at all 32 teams, including yourself. And you're saying, well, we know this team loves that guy, this team loves that guy, and we feel better about our board, and we feel better about understanding what other people are thinking about certain players. And theoretically, if you have the vast network and you have the conversations and the collaboration, you have more people in that circle of trust, and you're making those phone calls to other teams across the league because of that network, theoretically, that means you're going to reach less during the draft. You will have less Cole Stranges. You'll have less Tyquan Thorntons. Remember, we heard when Cole Strange was drafted, this isn't hindsight 2020. We heard most teams had what? Like a third-round grade on the guy? Some people thought he could have gone in the second round. But a lot of people in the league, when Cole Strange was drafted, they looked at it and said, why him in the first round? We heard from reporters, multiple reporters, that the rest of the league seen, and not every single team, of course, but a lot of teams in the NFL looked at Tyquan Thornton as somebody who might have been a third-round pick, fourth-round pick, maybe even as far down as a fifth-round pick. The Patriots are trading up in the second round to draft him. So did they really have a great feel as to what the rest of the league was thinking regarding all of these guys in the draft from year to year? Theoretically, when you have that network, when you have that communication, when you have that collaboration, you will reach less in the draft. And let's not forget about Elliott Wolf's learning tree. It's funny. Everybody talks about Gerard Mayo and the lack of his, tree across the NFL. And it's a point that should be made, and we have made a number of times. However, we never discuss Elliott Wolf's tree. We never, discuss some of the good trees that are within this franchise. Elliott Wolf's father, Ron, is an NFL Hall of Famer. He's one of the best to ever do it in the front office. That is his father. And he has been learning from his father since he was like 8 or 9 years old. There are stories when young little Elliott Wolf was running around the locker room. He has been at the feet of his father learning this front office process his entire life. I think that's a good thing that you can learn from a Hall of Famer in your own home, night in and night out, and have those conversations. Wolf worked with John Dorsey for a number of years. John Dorsey happens to be the guy who drafted Patrick Mahomes. very respected across the league, drafted Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. So Elliott Wolf, learning from his Hall of Fame father, Ron, learning from John Dorsey, learning from Bill Belichick, and taking the best of those guys, of those individuals, and taking the best ideas from them about how to run a front office. I think that is something that we can't overlook. Elliott Wolf's tree is freaking legit. Let's go to Kelso H, who has a super chat. Again, you can jump into the conversation with your super chats. You get to the front of the line with your question or comment. And, of course, you contribute to the program. As always, I appreciate every single cent that you guys and gals contribute to this show. It means the world to me. Also, what means the world to me are those likes. Take a second of your time. Click that thumbs up. If you're on Facebook, Twitter/X, you can like the show as well. But especially YouTube, if you're watching us, give us that like. And don't forget to subscribe. Kelso H says, after 4 Super Bowls, the hubris got to his head and he self-destructed. It's Friday. I promise you, I haven't had a craft beer yet. That's later. Then he proceeded to destroy the Patriots. No statue for him. He created a terrible mess in the last 5 years. So this is something that I've said before, and I'll say it again. But since Kelso sent a super chat, I'll spend a little bit longer on this. I think it's possible that you can separate Dynasty Bill Belichick and Bill Belichick of the last 4 or 5 years. I do it. Some of you might disagree with that. But I think you can look at Belichick and what he did for the first 20 years of his run here, appreciate it, respect the hell out of it, and understand that he was really good at what he did, because he was really good at what he did. He was great with game management and clock management. He was fantastic with finding deals in free agency. He was awesome at addressing the margins of a roster. He was great when it came to drafting players, along with the guys that he had in that front office. I don't think you wipe away the first 20 years because of the Final Four. At least I don't do that. You can respect and appreciate that, but you can also look at the final 4 years of his tenure here for what it was, which was mostly a mess. And when you look at this roster, it is a mess. I don't know how many people saw this, but, Daniel Jeremiah, he actually posted on X/Twitter today. He's got this chart of playmakers on teams across the NFL, and he put up the Patriots chart, and they've got one playmaker on when you combine both sides of the ball. So there's no denying that this roster's in bad shape because of where Bill Belichick left it. But in my mind, there's no denying the impact that he had in the first 20 years and how much he meant to this program in this area. And I don't think you have 6 Super Bowls without Bill. So I think both are possible. All right, let's move on to Alex Van Pelt, because Alex Van Pelt spoke for the first time earlier this week as Patriots Offensive Coordinator. Like and subscribe. Less than 100 subscriptions away from 2,000, which is our goal come March 1st. So what did Alex Van Pelt say? He said a few things. I want to break it up per comment and tell you how I feel about each one, and you guys can throw your comments in as well. So Van Pelt said a good coordinator does what's best for his players. If it doesn't fit the player, how good is the scheme? Play to the player's strengths. And I think this is important because we talked about the Erhardt-Perkins offense for 20-plus years here with the Patriots. And the idea of the EP offense, the terminology, not everybody was a fit. There was a certain rigidness to the EP offense because it was almost like calculus in some corners of it. It put so much on the quarterback. It put so much on the wide receivers to change their routes if they needed to. There was just so much with it that you would bring a player in and you weren't necessarily playing to that player's strength because the Erhardt-Perkins offense ultimately limited some of those players. And they couldn't wrap their head around it. And you also had people like N'Keal Harry, not to tell you that he would have been great, but N'Keal Harry, he was miscast in this offense. They did not put him in a position to succeed. You could say the same thing last year about Kyle Duggar through the first 8 to 10 weeks when they put him at free safety and he looked like a duck out of water. So the rigidness of the EP offense, I think, really hurt the production of some players and really got in the way, especially over the past few years, really got in the way of how that offense could have been effective. And we always look at Mac Jones. Let's not forget, Mac Jones was thrown in year one. Brady had that full year to learn the system, study the system. Mac was thrown right in. And there's a lot on the quarterback. A lot on the quarterback. So when you look at Van Pelt saying good coordinator does what's best for his players, if it doesn't fit the player, how good is the scheme? Play to the player's strengths. You can look at the EP offense and you can say that offense didn't always play to certain guys' strengths. And it was difficult to fit some of the guys in. Chad Ochocinco, for example, was completely freaking lost in this offense. Also, understanding the player. That is critical. Understand who you're bringing in. When you draft somebody, what do they do best? And stick to what they do best. I'm a wrestling fan, pro wrestling fan. You can see the belt behind me back there, the championship up on the shelf. I'm a pro wrestling nerd. Almost became a writer for the WWE years ago, by the way. So when you look at this, pro wrestling, Paul Heyman was a booker, and the booker is the guy who sets up the matches, right? And they also write the television and all that stuff. And Paul Heyman, when I was younger, I was reading something that he was saying, and Paul Heyman put it simply. He said his job as the booker, handling the wrestlers on TV, his job was to accentuate strengths and hide the weaknesses. And the same thing can be said for a football coach. Accentuate the strengths, hide the weaknesses. And so the Patriots didn't always do that over the last 4 or 5 years. They did it an awful lot in the first 20. They would look at a player, they would say, all right, you do that great. That's what we're going to utilize you as. Other times, especially late in this process, there were a number of square pegs, round holes. And so I think it's vital when Van Pelt says, if it doesn't fit the player, how good's the scheme? Play to the player's strengths. Understand who you're bringing in. Understand what they do well. Understand how you can get the best out of whoever you're bringing in. That's huge to this entire program moving forward. And really, Van Pelt back it up. Some people might say, oh, he's just talking, right? This is just words, blah, 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 blah. Play to the player's strengths, etc. Well, no, because we saw this in Cleveland last year with Van Pelt and Stefanski, right? The epitome of the 2023 Browns was figuring out a way to get the best out of any player. And that's what they did. They were down to like their third or fourth offensive lineman, right? They were starting 5 different quarterbacks. They lost Nick Chubb. He played only 2 games. He had like 30 carries or whatever it was. And that team still won 11 games. That is what that comment speaks to. Here was something else that Van Pelt said, and this got a lot of traction. Running the football wins games and wins championships if you can do that late into the season. Now, some people were like, oh my God, running the football. Here's a huge misnomer, okay? Here's a huge misnomer. When you look at Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, these new wave offenses, right? People make the mistake, I believe, to look at those offenses and say, oh, they're explosive and they throw the football, blah, blah, blah. And everybody kind of thinks of almost like a shotgun, spread it out. We're going to throw the football 50 times. That's not the case. That's not the case. So I just want to make sure that people understand when Van Pelt talks about running the football is at the very heart of the West Coast offense. Sean McVay runs the football. Kyle Shanahan runs the football. So people have this misconception of what those offenses are. The proof's in the pudding. The Rams had the 12th most run attempts this year. They had the 11th best yards per carry in the NFL. San Francisco had the 8th most rushing attempts in the league, and they were 4th in yards per carry. The Browns, with Stefanski And of course, with AVP, the Browns, without Nick Chubb, ran the 4th most attempts in football last year, and they were 12th in yards. So the Rams ran the football. The 49ers run the football. The Browns run the football. The West Coast offense is based off of the run, much like pretty much every offense in football history, aside from the shotgun, just toss it, right? And what this offense does, we went over this. If you want to check it out, we did a pod about a week or two ago about what this offense could look like with Van Pelt and McAdoo. But this offense uses the run game to then attack defenses in the secondary. They like to create chunk plays off of play action. That's the idea with running the football. You'll see a number of bootleg action called here in New England now. Again, that's off of running the football. So when Van Pelt says, running the football wins games and wins championships, for the most part, unless you have Patrick Mahomes, the alien, and you don't feel like you have to run the football, that's the case across the league, still to this day in 2024. Phil Perry said last night on NBC Sports Boston, I think it's like 10 out of the 12 teams that made the playoffs are in like the top 10 in EPA per run play. So running the football still works in 2024. One more thing Van Pelt said. Quarterback play is a big part of what I believe in. If you can make him successful, oftentimes your offense is successful. I found it interesting that some focused on the running comments, but overlooked this comment. It's not like Van Pelt said we're not going to use the quarterback. We're going to base our offense totally on the running back. Ramondre Stevenson is going to be the most important player on this football team. He didn't say anything like that. He was telling us that the heart of this offense is running the football because everything is based off of the run. You get chunk explosive plays off of the run because of play action and bootleg and vertical shots down the field. But he also said, he followed that up by saying the quarterback is vitally important. Quarterback play is a big part of what I believe in. You make him successful, oftentimes your offense is successful. Quarterback appreciation. I wrote a column about this at Boston Sports Journal, I think it was a week or two ago. The idea that the Patriots, this staff, in this new regime, they are totally behind the idea of quarterback play, appreciating the quarterback, evaluating the quarterback, developing the quarterback, giving the quarterback help. And I love that because that's not what we saw the last 4 years. They understand the importance of quarterback play. The West Coast offense is quarterback friendly. It opens up the field. Open receivers. And I think also you look at the quarterback evaluation, which is important, especially when you have the 3rd pick in the draft this year. So this again shows you, this again tells you, that this team now is going to appreciate and respect quarterback play. And they understand that they've got to get a guy in that position and support that guy. One more nugget from this week coming up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Just take 1 second of your day and click that thumbs up button. We absolutely appreciate it when you do that. Yes, there was a troll that found their way in, and we have banned the troll. And if we see the troll again, bring it to my attention because that troll said something absolutely ridiculous and heinous. And I'm trying to delete the comments, which were just classless. And it's, got to deal with some of that. Fortunately, many of you act like adults, which is good and much appreciated because you can always get some of that stuff. Roll Patch jumped in and said, Bill Belichick never drafted players from schools that played in the EP system. Mac played a West Coast offense, not EP. There was a lot of, back and forth about how can this guy work in this offense? Can this guy work in this offense? A lot of times those guys did not work in the offense. And it was really messy over the final few years. And what we learned was, you had Brady, who was the supercomputer. He was able to run the offense and knew exactly what needed to be done when it needed to be done. And he helped other guys. He helped receivers and tight ends and running backs. He helped his skill position players be better because of his unbelievable understanding of that offense. The fact that they put more into the offense as time went on tells you that. It was crazy. It was absolutely nuts. Ryan Shaw says, where has N'Keal succeeded in this league, though? He's not doing much on other teams either. I get your point, Ryan, but what I would say is we don't know what N'Keal Harry, and again, I'm not telling you N'Keal Harry would have been great. What I'm saying is if the Patriots utilized N'Keal Harry in what he was much more comfortable with, which was contested catches in the red zone, they were moving him around in spots that he wasn't comfortable with, that you would have probably gotten a little bit more production from him, and he would not have been a complete waste. I'm not telling you it would have been great. And we don't know how much of the early N'Keal Harry and how he was totally out of sorts. We don't know how much that has impacted him since. All right, let's get to Mark Trestman. Why Mark Trestman? Because I just want to mention something at the end of this week that I think is funny. Maybe not haha funny, but so the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh hired Mark Trestman as a senior offensive assistant this week. The last time Trestman was in the NFL was 2016. When he was head coach in Chicago, he had a record of 13-19. Ben McAdoo, of course, was hired by the Patriots as a senior offensive assistant. Same role. McAdoo was Carolina's offensive coordinator in 2022. He was 13-15 as the head coach of the Giants. Mark Trestman is 68 years old. Ben McAdoo is 46 years old. Now, why am I looking at this? Why are we talking about this? Because of the reaction to the Ben McAdoo hire. And not just the McAdoo hire. You could hate the McAdoo hire. That's fine. But some people were taking the extra step when looking at the McAdoo hire, and they were taking shots at Mayo and Elliott Wolf. And the McAdoo hire could end up being terrible. It could end up being great. I don't know. You don't know. None of us know. It could be a disaster. It could work out beautifully. But when people look at Jim Harbaugh, he is respected as a team builder. And a lot of talking heads will tell you, oh, man, Jim Harbaugh knows how to build a ball club. I would have loved Jim Harbaugh here in New England. And I agree with that. I agree with that sentiment about Harbaugh's ability to build a staff and to build a team. So Harbaugh gets the benefit of the doubt because of his reputation as a team builder. What I question is, why are some people not giving Mayo and Wolf an opportunity to prove that they stink? Why are they not getting the benefit of the doubt? They could be awful at what they do. This could be a gigantic swing and a miss. 2 years from now, we could all be talking and saying, man, oh, man, did Robert Kraft really screw up by bringing Mayo, by promoting Mayo and by promoting Elliott Wolf? Or 3 years from now, we could say, man, in hindsight, they nailed it. We don't know. We have no clue. So why are we just killing Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf about every decision they make with this staff that, we don't like or that we're questioning when we don't have an idea as to whether or not these guys are going to work? That's why I always say, I look at it when you're hiring and when you're overhauling a staff like this, I'm not telling you that any of these guys are going to work or that they're going to fail. I just look at the idea and I look at the process. I didn't like the process of the head coach thing. I didn't like the process of the front office. But I like the idea of what they're putting together on this staff, and it's something I want to get into deeper next week. But I like the idea of how they are putting this staff together and the different elements of this staff. Not telling you it's going to succeed. But there was a lot of, oh, man, Gerard Mayo, Elliott Wolf, they're lost. I mean, look at how lost they are. They just hired Ben McAdoo. Ben McAdoo, hardy har har, right? These guys don't know what they're doing. They can't find their ass with two hands and a flashlight. There was a lot of that going on when McAdoo was brought in. So how do those people feel about Mark Trestman getting hired in L.A.? I don't think Jim Harbaugh's lost. I don't think Jim Harbaugh's clueless. So the narrative that, Mayo and Wolf putting this staff together were supremely desperate, to me, that's going a step too far. because we just saw Jim Harbaugh, who's buttoned up, has put together a very good staff out there in LA, has a lot of talent on that Chargers team. We just saw him make a very similar hire to Ben McAdoo with Mark Trestman. So is Jim Harbaugh lost? How about we see how it all works out? I'm sure that Elliott Wolf has tangible reasons why McAdoo is with the program. I'm pretty sure. I don't think that Ben McAdoo just kind of parachuted into an office and they said, "Oh, you're here, Ben? We'll hire you." I don't think Mayo and Wolf have a dartboard in the office and they blindfold each other and they just throw darts and say, "Oh, whatever the dart hits, that's who we're going to hire." So I just found the Trestman hire very interesting. Again, not telling you that it's going to be good or terrible. I'm not telling you that Ben McAdoo is going to be good or terrible. I just found it telling because there were multiple people, a number of people in Boston with the media, on the radio, on TV, saying, "Oh, these guys have no idea what they're doing. They're desperate. They have to go to the bottom of the barrel and get somebody like Ben McAdoo." And Jim Harbaugh hired somebody who has a worse head coaching record than McAdoo and has not coached in the NFL since 2016. Daniel jumps in with a super chat. I just don't understand, for so many people complaining how Belichick ran things. We get what we ask for, a new coach, and now they complain before they even do their job. Let's wait until free agency at least. Yeah, it's this idea, right? You know, everybody wanted change. Well, not everybody. A lot of people want to change, right, Daniel? They were tired. I want to change. I thought it was time for Belichick to move on. If Belichick was willing to be a coach and a coach only and walk away from personnel and have no say and deal with all the changes that were going to happen, I would have entertained that because I still think he's a very good coach. I don't think he's a great coach anymore. I think he's very good, especially compared to a lot of the other coaches in the league. There's not a lot of good coaching in the NFL. As crazy as it sounds, it's true. A lot of guys screw up the clock. A lot of guys take bad timeouts, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to change, this is what change looks like. And some would say, "Oh, well, Gerard Mayo is just a Belichickian." Clearly, he's not. Again, I want to get into this deeper next week. The idea behind this coaching staff. If you want to change, you got change. The offensive staff completely turned over. Right? The front office with Elliott Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith. We talked about it twice this week, including earlier on this episode. How they are going to change the way, fundamentally, how that front office has been run for almost a quarter of a century. If you want to change, you're getting change. But you have to get to Daniel's point, you have to allow that change to happen, and then you have to allow some time to see if that change works. I'm telling you right now, this team is not going to win 11 games in 2024. If they do, fantastic. This is a 2 to 3 year rebuild. So and I understand some people disagree with this. I'm a firm believer in let people do their job and see if they can do said job. I'm not going to write anybody off until they prove that they can't do the gig. That's how my mind works. And I understand other people, their minds work differently. That's what makes us us, right? We're all different people, different backgrounds, different principles, different philosophies, etc. The way I look at this is, do I like the idea? If I like the idea, then I'm going to see if it works. So when you look at this staff, who has not worked as a staff together yet, let's see if it works. And I know people say we got to do a show today. Yes, I'm doing a show today. It's 100% possible to do a show without leaping to grandiose conclusions and what this is going to look like 3 years down the road. It's possible to do that. And so what I'm saying today is I like the idea of a lot of what they've done with this coaching staff. Can't guarantee anything beyond that. But these guys deserve the benefit of the doubt because they're doing this job. Some of them for the first time. There's going to be a learning curve. So no, I'm not going to sit there and I'm not going to say, oh, this is an abject failure before they even have one game played. Again, that's just me. Everybody enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Monday's a holiday. Pretty sure I'll be doing a show. President's Day, Pretty sure I'll be doing a show. If you're off work, maybe we'll have even more eyeballs on the program. So everybody enjoy your weekend. Many of you probably have a long weekend. So maybe that means you'll have a couple of long nights. Maybe not. But I appreciate every single one of you. Don't forget to like this podcast when you're listening to it or watching it, especially on YouTube. Subscribe as well. Trying to hit 2,000 subscriptions by March 1st. I appreciate the super chats from today. As always, that's awesome. Again, have a safe weekend. Be good. And aside from some crazy breaking news, we'll talk to you next week. The Nick Cattle Show.